Colleen, why don't you kick us off?
Okay, thanks, Dan. I wanted to ask about negotiations over voting rights. I
Mhm.
wanted to see, what you guys are expecting this week, and then what's Plan B if things go south, to secure elections and ensure voting access if the bills don't pass.
Well, as you all know, the negotiation or the debate is starting in the Senate. The president's view is that the American people deserve to see where their leaders stand on protecting their fundamental rights. That is a reason to move forward with this debate and this vote this week. And his view is also that opposing rule changes to make the protection of voting rights a reality is supporting an obstacle to protecting voting rights. It's part of the important process. In terms of so we will continue to, and you've heard the president say, and I'm sure he will reiterate for you if anyone asks him tomorrow, that until his last breath, he will be fighting for the protection of voting rights. And that means conversations and fighting to get legislation at the federal level through is going to continue. And those conversations will continue. I will note that in addition, we have also been working with organizations all across this country who are building diverse coalitions to pass voter laws and push back against those that make it harder to vote and threaten free and fair administration of elections, in addition to doing the critical work to register and educate voters. These organizations have built grassroots leadership at the state level. They're providing training, policy, research, messaging guidance, and directing organizing to register voters, deploy voter protection teams in states that are rolling back voter protection. I'd also note the Vice President knows Americans at every level are focused on this fight, and she will continue engaging and leading this effort with activists, policy leaders, and elected officials around the country. But right now our focus is on the debate, on the vote that is going to be happening, and on the fact that it will highlight very clearly for the American people who stands with them in protecting their voting rights and who stands against it.
That makes sense. What do you hope to achieve with the Secretary of State heading not only to Ukraine but then later to Geneva to meet with Lavrov, especially since talks over Ukraine aren't exactly going all that well right now?
Well, let me just give you a little bit of an update on where things stand. And obviously you're following this closely, but this morning Secretary Blinken spoke with Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov. They agreed to meet in Geneva, as you noted. At that meeting, Secretary Blinken will urge Russia to take immediate steps to de-escalate. He will also fly to Kyiv to consult with President Zelensky and Ukraine's leaders and to Germany for consultations. As you also know, there is a congressional delegation that is also on their way there. And it's a note, I would note that just indicates that support for Ukraine has always been a bipartisan issue, and we welcome that. But where things stand right now, President Putin has created this crisis by amassing 100,000 Russian troops along Ukraine's borders. This includes moving Russian forces into Belarus recently for joint exercises and conducting additional exercises on Ukraine's eastern border. So let's be clear. Our view is this is an extremely dangerous situation. We're now at a stage where Russia could at any point launch an attack in Ukraine. And what Secretary Blinken is going to go do is highlight very clearly there is a diplomatic path forward. It is the choice of President Putin and the Russians to make whether they are going to suffer severe economic consequences or not. Go ahead. Oh, let me go around to people who had a question. Go ahead. Trevor.
Could you, when you're talking about kind of this meeting that the Secretary of State is going to have with Sergei Lavrov, what is is there an expectation that he's going to provide some sort of response to the issues that were raised in the January 10th meeting?
Oh, well, again, I don't have anything for you to specifically preview on the behind-the-scenes negotiations and discussions, but our position has been crystal clear from the beginning, the position of the President and the Secretary of State, that there are two paths. There's a diplomatic path forward. We certainly hope they take that path. There's the other path. It is up to the Russians to determine which path they're going to take, and the consequences will be severe if they don't take the diplomatic path.
In terms of consequences, there's been reporting out of Europe that essentially this idea that's been floated about taking Russia out of the SWIFT financial payment system is basically off the table at this point. Is that accurate?
No option is off the table. In our view, we continue consulting closely with European counterparts on severe consequences for Russia if it further invades Ukraine.
And do you have a commitment from the German government that they will end the Nord Stream 2 pipeline?
I think, as you know, it is not functioning currently. You've seen the steps that they have taken recently. Germany's Federal Network Agency has suspended the certification process as well of Nord Stream 2. And our view continues to be that stopping the Nord Stream 2 pipeline is a credible peace we hold over Russia at this point in time, especially since it is not functioning. And if sanctions are imposed right now, which some are proposing, and Russia views these sanctions as a sunk cost, then this would be one less consideration in its calculus. So, of course, we're consulting closely with all of our partners and allies in this, but I would just note again that the pipeline's not operational, that Germany's Federal Network Agency has suspended the certification process. Go ahead.
Thanks. Staying on Ukraine and Russia, what does the White House make of the evacuation of Russian diplomatic staff from their embassy in Kiev? And do you think the threat of invasion is getting higher or lower?
Well, I think, as I noted a few minutes ago, we believe we're now at a stage where Russia could at any point launch an attack on Ukraine. I would say that's more stark than we have been. In terms of the decision to evacuate their embassy or to move personnel out of their embassy, we have information that indicates the Russian government was preparing to evacuate their family members from the Russian embassy in Ukraine in late December and early January. We certainly would refer you to them for more specifics about what their decision is, but we don't have an assessment on why in the meeting.
Okay, and then another one on reports that the White House is in talks with the FAA and wireless providers on the 5G rollout and there's potential disruption to airline travel. Is there anything more you can tell us on this agreement you're working on, and are you trying to prevent any flight cancellations which could start as soon as tomorrow?
Well, we are. Those conversations are ongoing. I don't have an update at this moment, but they're ongoing right now, I would say. So we have the safest airspace in the world. We're committed to reaching a solution around 5G deployment that maintains the highest level of safety while minimizing disruptions to passenger travel, cargo operations, and our economic recovery. We certainly understand what's at stake for both industries. We are actively engaged, as you said, with the FAA, FCC, wireless carriers, airlines, and aviation equipment manufacturers to reach a solution. And we believe that with continued cooperation, we can chart a path forward. But certainly, minimizing flight disruptions, ensuring safety in travel is a top priority.
And then one more, going Bloomberg on you. Microsoft buying Activision Blizzard will create the world's third biggest video game company. Does the White House have any competition concerns with this acquisition?
Well, I would just note that today there is an announcement by the FTC and the Justice Department that's probably happening now. Broadly speaking, this is not about this specific case, which is, in our view, a critical step towards delivering on one of the key priorities of the executive order the president signed, which is strengthening enforcement against illegal mergers. And it basically kicks off the technical process to review merger guidelines. As it relates to this specific case that you mentioned, I don't have a comment on a specific merger, but I just wanted to point you to their announcement, their press conference that may be going on right now. Go ahead. Oh, Joy, let me go ahead.
Okay.
Let me go ahead so I just get to people
Yeah,
and ask questions.
Sure.
Thank you. There's bipartisan supply chain resiliency legislation in the House, the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act. Is the White House engaged in getting lawmakers on board with this?
Very closely engaged, and we've been advocates for investing in manufacturing here in the United States, including investment in our chips manufacturing capacity, but we're very closely engaged in these discussions.
Say a little bit more about that, what kind of discussions you're having and where there's...
Just that we've been engaged from the beginning. The president has long been an advocate for increasing investment in our manufacturing capacity at home, and we are looking forward to it moving forward.
Another one. Does the president think that members of Congress should be prohibited from trading stocks? The president is prohibited from doing this, so where does he stand on this, and should their spouses be too?
The president didn't trade individual stocks when he was a senator. That is how he approached things. He also believes that everyone should be held to the highest standard, but he'll let members of the leadership in Congress and members of Congress determine what the rules should be. Go ahead, Michael.
Thanks, Ben. A couple questions on what happened in Texas over the
Sure.
How is it that an individual who was known to MI5 in Britain, who was on a watch list as of 2020, ended up in a synagogue in Texas? How did that happen?
Oh, well, our understanding, and obviously we're still looking into this, is that he was checked against U.S. government databases multiple times prior to entering the country, and the U.S. government did not have any derogatory information about the individual in our systems at the time of entry. We're certainly looking back, as I referenced, at what occurred to learn every possible lesson we can to prevent attacks like this in the future. Beyond that, I'd certainly refer you to the Department of Homeland Security.
Obviously, the president referred to the incident as an act of terror. What is the significance of referring to the individual as a terrorist or referring to the incident as a terrorist incident?
I think, and I talked to the president about this that day as well, I think there's no question that when somebody goes into a house of worship and threatens and holds hostage individuals who are there, that is an act of terror. That is terrorism. That is why he called it that, because we don't need to be, because it's very clear it's what it is. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks, Jen. Getting back to voting rights for a minute.
Yeah.
You mentioned that the White House administration is going to continue to push back against state legislatures. The president mentioned this as well last week. But just to drill down on that a little more, can we expect to see more litigation from the Department of Justice around this? And if you look at cases that have already been filed under Section 2, we know historically that takes a very long time, years to resolve. Are you confident that there is any action you can take that would result in any outcome before the midterms?
Well, I'd really refer you to the Department of Justice. As you know, they have doubled their funding for voting rights protections, but in terms of individual cases or legal intentions or actions, I would point you to them.
And then quickly, to shift a little bit to healthcare and the Affordable Care Act, that was something that President Biden ran on, expanding the ACA.
Yeah.
He was able to do that, of course, through the rescue plan, but some of those other pieces were tied to Build Back Better, expanding Medicaid, again, addressing subsidies. Is there a plan B, a consideration of what steps could be taken if Build Back Better doesn't pass?
Well, here's the good news. There's a lot of interest, excitement, and engagement with a broad range of members of Congress about the shared desire to get something done and to lower costs for healthcare, for elder care, for childcare. And there are a range of conversations that are ongoing, lots of ideas that we're discussing and we're engaged with. That is the status. The president proposed this as part of his package because he, as you said, he has advocated for, he ran on, he has fought for an expansion of access to healthcare, lower costs for healthcare. He also feels very strongly about lowering the cost of prescription drugs, something he thinks is frankly shouldn't be controversial in this country. If you're not for lowering the cost of prescription drugs, what are you for, Republicans in Congress, is his basic fundamental question. So this is something we will continue to discuss. We're continuing to fight for and work for. But, you know, I know there have been a range of reports out there, and I would just make very clear there is no specific proposal we are putting forward. We are just engaged in a range of conversations with members of Congress about what to do next. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Can you provide an update on the COVID testing website?
Sure.
Is it ready to go? Has the hotline number been created? Resiliency against crashes, that type of thing?
Sure. So covidtest.gov is in the beta phase right now, which is a standard part of the process typically as it's being kind of tested in the early stages of being rolled out. We didn't start from scratch here, of course. The Postal Service already runs a website that sells goods to the public, as you know. Every website launch, in our view, comes with risk. We can't guarantee there won't be a bug or two, but the best tech teams across the administration and the Postal Service are working hard to make this a success. So it will officially launch tomorrow morning. It's in the beta testing phase right now. And I would also note that the U.S. Digital Service, which was an organization founded after healthcare.gov, after the healthcare.gov rescue, has been supporting the Postal Service to ensure that they have what they need to be successful in this critical moment. So looking forward to an official launch tomorrow morning, and right now it's in the beta phase.
On Ukraine and Russia, I know you said that the United States is ready for Russia to engage at any time. I wanted to ask you, though, about the media narrative of the falsifying or alleging that Russia is going to say that Ukraine is going to attack Russia. Have you seen any indications of that? Has that narrative been put into work yet?
We talked about this a fair amount on Friday because we've seen efforts to push that narrative in the media and in the public. And I think one of the key roles we can play here is making very clear that there is a long history of propaganda from Russian leadership, that they use it as a tool to spread misinformation as a means of gaining ground, and we should be very clear about what's accurate and inaccurate, and that's an inaccurate narrative. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you. Since there are so few reporters in here today, I'd like to ask briefly about 3 transparency issues. The first one, I'm kind of amazed hasn't been brought up more in this room. That is that Vanity Fair reported recently that on October 22nd, a group of health experts from Harvard, the Rockefeller Foundation, and other groups proposed on a Zoom meeting with administration officials a plan to mass distribute coronavirus tests to homes before Christmas to prevent a winter surge of COVID-19 cases, but that they were told 3 days after that Zoom meeting that that idea was dead. So I emailed you about this yesterday and again this morning so that you'd be able to track down a firm answer on 2 details here. The first detail is which administration officials attended that October 22nd meeting. For example, did Drs. Fauci and Walensky participate? And was President Biden personally briefed at the time on that recommendation before it was passed over?
Well, maybe people haven't asked about it because we've done a lot of what was discussed in that meeting that happened a couple of months ago, including massively expanding our testing program and capacity. And the issue at the time, which was a very small part of the conversation, was that the market had not expanded enough to at that moment in time be able to launch the website we're launching tomorrow. And the president, used the Defense Production Act, invested $3 billion to expand it, quadrupled the size of our testing capacity, and now we've ordered 1 billion doses. So we see that as our COVID team, the members who participated, saw that as a very constructive meeting, a good meeting, a lot of which we've worked to implement.
So the idea, though, to mass distribute tests to homes before Christmas and New Year's, that idea was not adopted. How can President Biden shut down the virus if he's, not being briefed on these ideas? That's my question. So I'm wondering who were the advisors, and was President Biden briefed on this idea at the time?
Well, I think I just answered your question, which you may not have been listening. Maybe you were waiting to read your next question, which is fine. But I just answered your question. Let me finish, Stephen, I'm finishing. What I said to you just a minute ago is that we did not have the capacity at the moment. We had a very constructive meeting with this group. We agreed in the need to expand our testing capacity. That's why we quadrupled the size of our testing capacity and why the president had already used the Defense Production Act to invest $3 billion. But the market did not have the capacity at that moment to do what we're doing tomorrow.
Yes, I hear what you're saying, but that's not the question I asked. The question I asked was
Do you have another question? I think I've answered your question.
Was President Biden briefed at the time?
Again, I've answered your question. If you have another one, I'm happy to answer it. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to the next person.
I didn't get answers there, but I'll move on to another one.
Great.
The second question is that in light of President Biden's first year coming to a close, the data indicates that he spent a quarter of his days, at least partially, in Delaware. In light of that, will the White House be reconsidering the decision not to release visitor log information from his Delaware residences?
Well, the president goes to Delaware because it's his home. It's also where his son and his former wife are buried. And it's a place that is obviously close to his heart. A lot of presidents go visit their home when they are president. We also have gone a step further than the prior administration and many administrations in releasing visitor logs of people who visit the White House, and we'll continue to do that. Go ahead in the back. I think we're done, and we're going to move on. Go ahead in the back.
The Reuters reported this morning the Biden administration is reviewing e-commerce giant Alibaba cloud business for U.S. national security reasons. Can you confirm?
I'd really have to check with our national security team on that. I'm happy to do that, and we'll get back to you after the briefing. Go ahead in the back.
Hey, Jen. I want to pivot back to voting rights,
Sure.
particularly the president's speech last week. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how it came together, but also I wonder if you'll respond to some of the criticism about it, that it was too aggressive or divisive, and that some of the rhetoric that he used wasn't conducive to getting folks who are opposed on board.
Well, sorry, which piece did you want me to start with?
Whichever one is best for you.
Okay. Well, I would say first that, the president delivered a powerful speech about the protection of people's fundamental rights in this country, which is their right to vote, their right to vote for anyone they choose, whether it is him or someone else. It was not a partisan speech. It was intended to lay out for the public exactly what's at stake and lay out for elected officials what's at stake. And he stands by everything he said in that speech.
Can you talk a little bit about how it came together, though? Like, who did he or the White House consult with? Like, how did he land at this point? I'm just trying to get to the genesis of it.
Well, he consulted. There have been discussions for months on voting rights on the Hill with Democrats, certainly an open door to Republicans to have a discussion among members and among staff about a path forward, something that 16 Republicans who are serving today have supported in the past. And also he consulted a lot with civil rights leaders. We consulted with civil rights leaders, with voting rights activists, and others who have been working around the clock to advocate for voting rights.